the story's clearly taken a very different direction to what we've experienced over the last few days. I mean, it's been absolutely fevered speculation, which has resulted in wild and defamatory accusations being made on social media. And what we have now is evidence of a family in trauma. Clearly, this is having a huge impact on Huw Edwards and his closest loved ones. And I think something that I've tried to keep in the back of my mind while reporting on this over the last 5 days is that Huw Edwards has been really open about his struggles with mental health. He is an advocate for talking about mental health issues, and those who know him and have worked with him have suggested to me that the tenor of coverage and the scale of the coverage over the last few days may have had an impact on his mental health. And I think clearly we're seeing that borne out in the statement from Vicky Flynn today, which I think is really sobering and something for us all to reflect on.
With that in mind, Jake, I wonder whether we should have heard something sooner from Vicky Flynn, or was the timing of that statement at the same time that police said they had no criminal investigation to make? They'd concluded all of their investigation. No charges were to be brought. There was no criminal offence committed. Was her statement, do you think, lined up with that, and that's why we maybe haven't heard earlier from her or from anyone connected?
Well, I don't know whether those statements were coordinated. They clearly came out at an almost identical time, so you can sort of draw your own conclusions from that. I'm sure the determination that the Metropolitan Police made will have come as a huge relief to Huw Edwards and his family. And the baton has now been passed to the BBC, which will pick up the investigation. So it's difficult to speculate on whether the family felt it was appropriate to comment on these things earlier. Clearly, they would have had an opportunity to do so, and the fact that they didn't suggests that they felt that it wasn't quite the right time for them to name Huw Edwards, or for Huw Edwards indeed to name himself.
What's made Huw Edwards such a big name at the BBC?
I mean, Huw Edwards is the BBC's highest paid and highest profile news presenter. He is a man at the peak of his powers. He's had a 40-year career at the BBC. He is highly respected by his colleagues in terms of his broadcasting capability. He's an incredibly polished and calm presence on screen, and has many, many admirers among the BBC's audience. And I say he's at the peak of his powers because, he's come off the back of what was a really important year for him professionally. He was the man who delivered the news to the nation that Queen Elizabeth had died, which would have been a story, one of the biggest stories for generations. And having done that, he then anchored coverage of the Queen's funeral, which he later won a BAFTA for. And he was also, of course, in the presenter's chair for the coronation. And Huw Edwards is sort of synonymous with those big national moments. And I'm sure he will hope that he can clear his name of the allegations and continue in that position for the BBC.
As you say, he is one of the corporation's highest profile presenters, newsreaders. What questions might there be for the BBC to answer here, Jake, in your analysis? If we're to turn this back to the BBC, what do we need to know now?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that the BBC has questions to answer about its processes. The initial allegation came into the BBC in May. It made only 2 efforts to contact the source of that complaint. It did not tell Huw Edwards about the complaint. He found out only after the Sun had approached the BBC for comment last week. And I think it's really interesting that Vicky Flynn makes reference to that in the statement released today. So it's clearly a piece of information that they consider to be quite material. Suggests to me that they, and this is speculation on my part, but it suggests to me that they may have liked to have known about these allegations slightly sooner from the BBC. So, as I say, those are some questions for the BBC, and it's got to move forward with its investigation really carefully. Clearly, it has a duty of care to Huw Edwards. I mean, that much is really obvious now. But it also has a duty of care to those who have made allegations against him. And that will be a really tricky line to tread in the weeks and months ahead.
Jake, thank you so much for speaking to us. And